Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. You see someone across the room. Their eyes lock with yours. The air seems charged, as if time itself bends toward that moment. Your chest tightens, your body knows them before your mind does. The story you tell yourself is instant. This is destiny. This is my missing half. The world narrows to a single figure, and for a moment, nothing else exists. But what if that lightning strike isn't love at all? What if it is the echo of old wounds, the soul recognizing not safety, but danger disguised as home? Think of two people colliding like flint and steel. The spark feels undeniable, almost holy. They finish each other's sentences, they claim to have known each other forever. But underneath the glow, another force pulls the strings. Their chemistry is not born from harmony but from familiarity. Somewhere deep in the unconscious, the shadow whispers, "This person will hurt you in the same way you've always been hurt, and yet you will stay." What feels magnetic is not fate, it is memory, disguised as passion. You call it love at first sight. But love at first sight is often recognition of the familiar wound. The father who abandoned you, the mother who criticized you, the betrayal you never healed. You think you've met your twin flame, but you've only stumbled back into the fire you swore you'd escape. The body trembles not because of love, but because of fear disguised as longing. The heart races not from peace, but from danger wrapped in desire. The unconscious pulls you toward what it knows, even if what it knows is chaos. This is why intensity feels so addictive. You mistake the storm for passion. The whirlwind becomes proof that it must be real because it shakes you so deeply. You see couples who start with fire, who cannot keep their hands off each other, who talk through the night until sunrise. And yet soon enough, the very same fire burns them alive. Because obsession is not intimacy. Possession is not love. The drama you crave is the replay of your earliest lessons. That love comes with pain, that belonging means losing yourself, that closeness always carries danger. Jung said, "We are not what happened to us, we are what we choose to become." But when you are unconscious, you don't choose. Your wounds choose for you. They drag you back to the same characters, the same story over and over. You think it's a chance, you call it destiny, but it is only repetition, written by the shadow. This is why you keep falling for the same kind of person, the same kind of chaos, the same kind of heartbreak. Not because fate has cursed you, but because your shadow has not yet been faced. The painful truth is this: destiny is not always divine. Sometimes, what feels fated is only the return of the wound you refused to see. What you call soul recognition may only be trauma recognition. The shadow does not speak in words, it speaks in feelings. And the feelings it sends are powerful. The rush, the obsession, the certainty that this person is meant for you. But certainty can be a chain, not a blessing. Intensity can be a warning, not a gift. What feels magnetic may only be the shadow, calling you back into captivity. So hear this clearly. Not everything that feels like destiny is meant for you. Sometimes destiny is a prison dressed as love. Sometimes destiny is the wound replaying itself in your life until you decide to break the cycle. And when you finally see this, when you finally awaken to the truth, you step onto the real path of freedom. Not every chain is meant to be worn. What feels like destiny is often the shadow calling. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Carl Jung. You believe you've found comfort in someone's arms. They hold you. They promise never to leave. And for a moment you feel whole. But look closer. The calm you cling to is not peace. It is familiar. You mistake the ache in your chest for love because it echoes the same ache you carried as a child. What feels safe is only what feels known, and what feels known is the chaos you grew up in. Picture a child in a stormy home, raised on silence, neglect, or criticism. That child learns love means tension, distance, or pain. Years later, when you meet someone who gives you the same tension, your body lights up. Not because it is right, but because it is familiar. Chaos becomes connected. Hurt feels like home. And so you walk willingly into the arms of someone who repeats the story you never healed. The cruel paradox: you run from pain, yet you find it again, because deep down you call it love. This is the illusion of comfort. You tell yourself, they understand me, they complete me, I can't live without them. But behind the mask, it is not love that drives you. It is fear. Fear of being alone, fear of emptiness, fear of silence. And so you cling to obsession and call it passion. You excuse manipulation and call it devotion. You endure control and call it sacrifice. But passion is not supposed to suffocate you. Devotion is not supposed to erase you. And sacrifice that demands your soul is not love. It is bondage. Think about the patterns you've excused, the nights you lay awake waiting for a text that never came, the apologies that were followed by the same betrayal, the promises of change that only bought more time for destruction. You told yourself this was love because you mistook intensity for intimacy. You confused being consumed with being cherished. But true love is calm, steady, rooted in respect. What you are living is not love. It is dependency dressed in romantic words. And yet you stay, because leaving feels like death. Comfort becomes a cage, and the bars are built from your own fears. You tell yourself, at least I'm not alone. You trade freedom for the illusion of belonging. The tragedy is that pain feels safer than the unknown. You know how to navigate betrayal, silence, or neglect. But you don't know how to sit in peace or how to open yourself to someone who doesn't wound you. The unknown terrifies you more than the suffering you already understand. Jung warned, we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. You cannot escape the cage until you see it for what it is. You cannot heal until you admit that what you called love was only a mask, hiding the shadow's grip. This is the moment of exposure, to strip away the illusion and see clearly, to face the heartbreak that what felt like comfort was only a prison. And here is the most painful truth. False love is harder to leave than no love at all. Because it dangles hope. It feeds you just enough affection to keep you chained. It gives you fragments and convinces you they are whole. But you deserve more than fragments. You deserve more than cycles of hurt disguised as destiny. You deserve more than a cage dressed as comfort. What you thought was love was never love. It was only your shadow pulling you back into the familiar. Storm, love does not chain you, it frees you. If it binds, it is never love. The shadow is a living part of the personality and therefore wants to live with it in some form. Carl Jung, you think you choose who you love. You think attraction is free will, some magic spark only you can feel. But in truth, there is a hidden hand guiding you, a silent puppeteer buried deep in your unconscious. It is the shadow. The part of you made of everything you deny, everything you fear, everything you could not face as a child. When you were rejected, neglected, or betrayed, the wound did not heal. It sank. And now it pulls the strings of your desire. Picture a child standing by the door, waiting for a parent who never arrives. That child grows up, but the waiting never ends. The shadow remembers the ache, the emptiness. And so, when you meet someone who is distant, unavailable or cruel, you are drawn in like a moth to flame. It feels like destiny, but it is only recognition. The shadow whispers, "This person is familiar. This pain is home. Try again. Maybe this time you will fix it." But you cannot fix the past by repeating it. You only chain yourself to it over and over, and so the shadow becomes a mirror. You are not just falling in love with another person. You are falling into a reflection of your own wounds. They ignore you and you relive the ache of being unseen. They criticize you and you relive the sting of never being enough. They leave you and you relive the terror of abandonment. You confuse this reflection with fate. You think, "No one has ever made me feel so much." But the truth is darker. No one has ever made you feel so much of your unfinished pain. The mirror does not show you love. It shows you your shadow. Think back on your relationships. Different faces, different names, but the story repeats. One broke you with silence. Another broke you with betrayal. Another broke you with control. And yet, the aftermath felt the same. You are standing in the ruins, wondering how you ended up here again. This is no coincidence. It is repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to return to the same wound, as if reliving it could undo it. But every repetition only deepens the scar. The shadow does not heal by itself. It traps you until you finally face it. This is why you keep attracting the unavailable. Why do you keep forgiving the unfaithful? Why do you keep mistaking intensity for love? The shadow is not malicious, but it is relentless. It drags you back into the storm, hoping you will finally turn inward instead of outward. Hoping you will finally ask not, "Why did they do this to me again?" but "Why do I keep walking toward the same fire?" That question is the beginning of freedom. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You see now how true this is. Fate is not some cosmic design. Fate is the shadow, writing the same script until you dare to pick up the pen. Fate is the wound that keeps choosing for you until you choose differently. And so the realization comes, heavy and liberating. You have not been cursed in love. You have been unconscious. You have mistaken the strings for freedom, the mirror for destiny, the pattern for love. But once you see it, you can no longer pretend you don't. The shadow is revealed. The choice is yours. What once controlled you from the dark can only be broken in the light. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. Carl Jung, there comes a moment when the mask shatters. The one you thought was your soulmate suddenly turns cold. The promises evaporate, the passion curdles into silence, or betrayal explodes like glass under pressure. You stand there, stunned, as the person who once felt like destiny now looks like a stranger. One text, one argument, one final goodbye, and the whole story collapses in an instant. The illusion of forever breaks, and the sound of it echoes through your entire being. You thought you were chosen, now you feel discarded. The mask falls, and with it, your sense of self begins to unravel. This collapse is not just about losing them, it is about losing yourself. You stare into the mirror and wonder who you even are without their presence defining you. You scroll through old photos, hear their voice in your head, replay every word, every fight, every kiss. And in that replay, you begin to disappear. The laughter you once had feels foreign. The dreams you once carried now seem impossible. You measure your worth against their absence, and the verdict feels brutal. If they left, I must be nothing. It is not just heartbreak, it is annihilation. Your identity fractures into pieces, scattered across the floor of your memory. The world feels surreal. You walk through your day on autopilot, wearing a hollow shell where your soul used to shine. Friends tell you to move on, but their words can't touch the emptiness inside. You feel worthless, fragmented, as if every good part of you was tied to their validation. And now that they are gone, you are left with dust. You remember their touch and wonder if you will ever be touched again. You remember their love and wonder if you will ever be worthy again. This is the collapse. When the story you built, your identity upon, is ripped away and you are left with silence. And yet, in this silence, something else stirs. At first, it feels like nothing more than despair, nights where you can't sleep, mornings where you don't want to wake. The breaking point comes when the pain becomes unbearable, when you realize you can no longer go back, but you cannot see the way forward either. It is a terrifying threshold, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no bridge in sight. But Jung taught that the collapse of the old self is the beginning of individuation. The death of an illusion is the birth of truth. You are being stripped, yes, but stripped of the mask, not the essence. What feels like destruction is also an invitation to see yourself without their shadow covering you, an invitation to feel your worth outside the roles you played for them, an invitation to finally face the wounds that led you into this fire. The breaking point is not the end of you. It is the end of who you thought you had to be. And though the pain feels unbearable now, it is the very pain that carves the space where a truer self can be born. So if you feel shattered, worthless, or beyond repair, know this: you are standing at the threshold of transformation. The collapse is not your death, it is your awakening. What breaks you today is only clearing the ground for who you are meant to become. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Carl Jung, you thought it was love. Every argument, every storm, every moment of obsession felt like passion. But obsession is not love. Possession is not love. Chaos is not love. What you clung to was not the warmth of a partner, but the fire of your own unhealed wounds reflected back at you. Every text you waited for, every fight you replayed in your head, every desperate plea for attention, it was a mirror of your shadow, not proof of romance. The sleepless nights, the anxious waiting, the desperation to feel wanted, they were trauma bonds disguised as intimacy. You were addicted to the pattern, not the person. The highs were fleeting, the lows were endless, and the whole cycle was an unconscious echo of old rejection, abandonment, or betrayal you never named. This was never love. It was your shadow pulling you toward what felt familiar, what hurt like. Old wounds you could not yet heal, and now the realization begins. You start to see the relationship not as a verdict on your worth, but as a message from your unconscious. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every soul-shattering fight was a teacher, not a punishment. You were never unworthy. You were unhealed. This person was never your fate. They were a symptom of your unfinished inner work. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of rage or despair was a call from your deeper self to wake up, to see your patterns, to face the shadows you carried. What you thought was love was an unconscious script, not a reflection of your value. The experience becomes a lesson, not a condemnation, but an invitation to understand yourself. With understanding comes power. The chains of illusion begin to loosen. You see that your suffering was not your fault. You were not weak. You were human. You were not broken. You were learning. Each memory that once held you captive now becomes evidence, a guide pointing toward growth. The anger, the grief, the longing, they are transformed from prisons into teachers. You can forgive yourself for staying too long, for hoping, for believing. You can forgive the other person, not to erase the pain, but to release its grip. Clarity arrives like a steady light cutting through fog. You begin to see that freedom was never about them. It was about reclaiming your own mind, your own heart, your own life. This is the turning point. The story you believed in dissolves, replaced by the truth. What felt like love was the shadow's design, not your destiny. And in that truth, you find liberation. You are no longer bound by obsession, guilt, or false responsibility. You can look back without shame, without longing, without self-blame. You can finally release what was never yours to hold and make space for what truly belongs. Love born from wholeness, not wounded reflection. I release the shadow, reclaim my heart, and walk free into my own light. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. You have been running, always running, chasing validation, love, and recognition in others, thinking they could fill the void within you. But the truth waits in silence, in the shadows you have avoided. Healing does not come from another person. It begins when you turn inward, when you face the inner child you abandoned, the unmet needs you disguised as strength. Every fear, every wound, every longing you projected onto others' lives inside you, quietly guiding your choices. That restless ache you felt for years, the one that made you repeat the same mistakes, the one that made every relationship feel like a replay of old pain. It is the voice of the shadow, waiting to be seen. You cannot outrun it. You cannot bargain with it. You can only meet it, look into its eyes, and recognize it as part of yourself. And in that recognition, the first flicker of freedom emerges. Integration does not mean weakness, it means balance. The shadow you feared, the part of you labeled as shameful or unworthy, holds power beyond your imagination. Every jealousy, every anger, every self-doubt you have felt contains insight, energy, and potential. When you embrace it, you no longer react blindly to triggers. You no longer hand your choices to unconscious impulses. The rage becomes resolve, the fear becomes foresight, the grief becomes wisdom. Like a storm harnessed into wind turbines, the energy that once destroyed now propels you forward. You do not reject the shadow, you invite it to the table. You see its patterns, its needs, its lessons. And as you embrace these hidden aspects, you discover a depth of strength, a grounded presence that cannot be shaken by the chaos of the outside world. Self-mastery is not a vague ideal. It is the only true freedom. To rule your unconscious is to rule your destiny. No longer are you pulled by old fears, old attachments, or old wounds. You act with awareness, choosing responses rather than reacting, building rather than breaking. Every decision becomes deliberate, every moment conscious. The relationships you enter, the work you do, the life you create, all are informed by the clarity of self-rule. When you meet the shadow, integrate it, and master its impulses, you step into a life that is authentically yours. Power is no longer taken from you by circumstance or other people. It radiates from the core of your own being. You are no longer a puppet of your past. You are the architect of your soul, the commander of your inner world, the steward of your destiny. This is empowerment, raw, unshakable, transformative. Meeting the shadow is not easy. It demands courage, patience, and relentless honesty. But the reward is immeasurable. The fear of facing yourself dissolves in the presence of your own strength. The chaos of old patterns fades in the light of awareness. The chains that bound you for years shatter, replaced by a foundation of self-knowledge, self-compassion, and self-rule. The shadow does not disappear, but it no longer dominates. It becomes a partner, a guide, a source of insight. And in that partnership, you step fully into your power. You are whole, you are present, you are awake. And the life you create is no longer dictated by unconscious drives or old wounds. It is crafted by your conscious will, your clarity, and your courage. I meet my shadow, embrace my strength, and command my destiny. Nothing has a stronger influence on your future than your habitual thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. You have lived long enough in storms that left you breathless, chasing love that burned and scarred. But love is not fire that consumes indiscriminately. It is not obsession, jealousy, or the chaos that left your heart trembling. True love is a calm river, steady and deep, reflecting the sky without distortion. It is the quiet presence that does not demand, the respect that does not wound, the growth that does not suffocate. When you imagine love this way, you feel it first in yourself, in your boundaries, your choices, your ability to show up without fear. You begin to see that the whirlwind you endured was never love. It was a test, a mirror reflecting parts of yourself that needed care, courage, and honesty. Each late-night worry, each replayed argument, each fleeting hope you clung to, they were lessons disguised as pain. And now, with this new vision, the weight begins to lift. You notice the difference between a fire that burns you and a fire that warms you. You notice that peace does not mean passive. The choice of peace is a declaration of freedom. Destiny is not written in the mistakes of yesterday, nor in the chaotic pull of old patterns. It is written in the decisions you make now, in the courage to stand firm in your self-worth, in the willingness to honor your own rhythm. You can continue running into storms, repeating patterns that fracture your soul, or you can choose the sunlit path of calm awareness. You can choose relationships that nurture, not diminish, experiences that expand, not entrap. Each act of self-care, each boundary upheld, each honest confrontation with your own heart is a choice that redirects your story. Peace is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and transformative. With every moment, you claim agency over your life. The chaos that once seemed inevitable is no longer your master. You see it as an echo of old fears, a shadow you no longer serve. And in that clarity, hope blossoms. You realize that peace was always within reach, waiting for you to step into it, waiting for you. True destiny is peace, not chains.